Whatever this young fellow was dreaming about, it certainly wasn't movies. It's just the turn of the century, and movies are still in their infancy. The chances are he hasn't even heard of them, much less seen one. But because he happens to be a canny, observant young man, and because they happen to be shooting a movie close by, he's going to play an important role in the development of motion pictures. In the early days, filmmakers were content to record any kind of movement on film, and any action photographed was always shot just the way it happened.
All right, everybody. Madam, we're going to pick up the kid. Right again.
We're losing our sunlight.
Don't worry about it. Keep shooting. Madeline, don't stop acting.
Open up and stop.
All right,
even when the more imaginative and venturesome filmmakers began staging their happenings and linking them together with stories, scenes were still shot in sequence, just the way they actually happened, and just the way they'd appear on the screen.
Slowly, so the kid can imitate you. Stop! Stop!
And that's just why this director is having so much trouble shooting this scene for his comedy. He'd like the child to do everything the actress does. He's just not getting through to the boy.
Madam, we're going to pick up the kid.
Okay.
We're going to try it again. All right, everybody, we're going to shoot it again from beginning to end. And without interruptions. All right, everybody ready? Begin, start shooting, Fred. That's fine, Madeline. Keep moving, keep moving. Now slow down, Madeline. Now stop, put the boy down, and sit. All right now, Madeline. Pick the dandelions. Now start to blow on it. Slowly, so the kid can imitate you. Now what the hell's the matter with him? Stop, stop. Listen, you. You call yourself an actor? Why, you little load of no talent, you... Doesn't anybody listen to me around here? What's so funny, young man?
You ain't never gonna get that kid to do all that. He ain't that smart.
Now, what gave you that idea?
If you want him to do the same thing, you ought to have the girl do what the kid does.
But I don't want the girl to...
I'll bet she could get it right the first time.
I tell you, I don't want... Fred. Hey, Fred. Listen, Fred.
Yeah.
We're going to shoot the scene again.
Uh-huh.
But this time, we're going to shoot the kid first.
Right.
Let him do anything he wants. After
Good.
that, we'll shoot Madeline doing exactly what the kid did. Get it?
Yeah, I get it.
I still don't get it. Madeline's imitating the child. It doesn't make sense.
I know. It doesn't make sense the way I shot it. But now all you got to do is cut out the kid's sequences, splice them in after Madeline's sequences. That way the kid's imitating Madeline, right?
I guess so. But are you sure it'll really work?
You better have.
The action wasn't just what the director had originally planned, but it worked. And the movie turned out to great success. But even more important was its contribution to the development of motion pictures, for it introduced the technique of editing, which was to become an essential part of movie making. A good example of the great value of criticism, dissatisfaction, or just an ordinary gripe when it's presented in the form of a simple, constructive suggestion. And it was to tap this big, rich reservoir of ideas that the Army set up its special program to encourage suggestions. Not only did the program make it easy to submit suggestions, but it also rewarded those whose suggestions were adopted. The Army also profited from these suggestions because they made possible savings of millions of dollars. One of these suggestions came from Mrs. Kamens, an inventory management specialist in the subsistence office of the Army Materiel Command.
Oh, Mr. Charles, this is Dorothy Kamens. Just fine, thank you. How are you? I've been going over some of these inventory records, and I noticed that we're carrying more than 500,000 pounds of non-fat dry milk as a reserve item. Yes. Mm-hmm. I know, but it won't be used unless there's an emergency. In the meantime, we've got the expense of storing it, and with its keep time, it has to be rotated every year. Yes. It just seems like such a waste. Ned, did you notice anything different about the potatoes we had last night?
No. Why?
I used dehydrated milk instead of regular milk. It's a little more trouble, but it's less fattening and a lot cheaper.
Good.
I don't see why it can't also be used to prepare other basic foods, such as puddings and griddle cakes. And if it can, we should include it in the annual Army food plans. Maybe it could even take the place of the evaporated milk we now use in all of these foods.
Sure. Why not?
I'm going to suggest it anyway.
Huh? Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Kamens' idea was passed on to the people responsible for preparing the annual food plans, and they adopted it. Her suggestion not only impressed her superiors and everyone else, but it also brought her an award of $1,668, which she immediately used to correct another situation that had been bothering her for some time.
Ned, how do you like it? Ned! Ned! You've done it again.
Mrs. Kamens' suggestion was well worth the award she received, for by including the non-fat dry milk in the annual food plan and having it used whenever possible in place of evaporated milk, the stocks were automatically used up, and the Army eliminated the need for costly reserve storage and rotation. Her suggestion also made possible other additional savings because the dry milk proved to be cheaper to ship and store. Another suggestion submitted under the Army Suggestion Program came from a sergeant in the aviation office.
Now, we've had some problems with the UH-1 engine, but a lot of them can be taken care of by just following the proper procedure. That's what we've got to do here. Now, as you all know, these UH-1 engines can be seriously damaged if they're started when the battery voltage is too low. The batteries can be damaged if this voltage is too high. We've indicated the ranges in the operator's checklist, but pilots are still making hot starts. They've got to learn these control ranges, and they've got to check that voltage reading before starting up.
The sergeant was skeptical. It was easy enough for the pilots to check the DC voltage reading, but they'd never remember the critical voltage ranges. They had too much else on their minds. Anyhow, he had a much simpler solution, and all it required was some red and green colored tape. Red would be used to indicate the danger zones, and the green would indicate the operating range. With these markings, a pilot could see at a glance if the voltage was too low or too high, and there'd be much less chance of troublesome hot starts. The sergeant got $25 for his suggestion. Under the Army Suggestion Program, all Army personnel, civilian and military, are eligible to submit suggestions. But in order to be considered for awards, the suggestion must be outside or exceed the normal performance requirements of the person's job. Maintenance men frequently encounter situations or problems beyond the scope of their work, and consequently, they have many opportunities to make award-winning suggestions. For example, Chris Johnston, a maintenance foreman at Fort Knox, discovered that their wall lockers were sent to salvage when they were damaged, even those that were only slightly damaged.
Hey, Fred. Isn't there something we could do to fix these?
With the present cost of labor, just isn't worth it.
But it seems such a shame just to scrap them.
Well, I know, but it's cheaper just to get new ones. What you gonna do?
The idea of scrapping the lockers bothered Chris Johnston even more when he learned that they sent about 4,800 lockers to salvage each year.
You say then? Oh, that's good, Ed. I hadn't heard that. Ed, what I called you about was, I think I have a way to save those lockers we've been scrapping. Yeah, well, what I was thinking was, they always need work to keep the prisoners in the stockade busy. Why can't we send them the lockers and have the prisoners repair them? No, that's no problem. All they need is ordinary hand tools. I am going to suggest it. I just wanted to get your reaction. Okay, Ed. Good. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
As a result of Chris Johnston's suggestion, the damaged lockers were sent to the stockade for repair, and he got an award of $1,120. Over the years, the Army Suggestion Program has produced so many suggestions that it's getting harder and harder to find an activity that hasn't been influenced by them. Army Printing recently benefited from one of these suggestions. Each year, thousands of maps are turned out, and most of them were 5 colors. This bothered a production controller in the printing plant at Fort Benning.
You know, Pat, I was just thinking. It takes 3 runs to print these 5-color maps.
Can't be helped when your presses can only print 2 colors at a time.
Yeah, I know, but we could do it in 2 runs if we dropped one of the colors.
Why just 1? Why not drop 3 colors? Then we could finish the whole job in 1 run.
Well, you'd lose too much in a single or even a 2 or 3 color map. But you know, I'll bet they wouldn't even miss the 5th color. And we could get the same effect by combining the 2 other colors.
I never thought of that.
Not only would we save 1 run, but we'd also eliminate the cost of 1 plate and the ink used for the other color.
Marty's idea worked, and he received $655 for his suggestion. Suggestions can also help save lives. Recently, a civilian research biologist and his assistant were unpacking supplies in the medical branch laboratory at Fort Knox.
Say, this plastic packaging material is great.
A lot of things we get are packed in it. It's called air cap.
We ought to be able to use this for some of our shipments.
Sort of a cushioning effect. I bet this sort of cell construction would give great protection against shock.
Well, that's what I figure. Anyway, a lot more than we're getting now. You know, Alice, if we were to wrap our whole blood containers in this stuff, I'll bet we could safely airdrop them.
You're right.
Not only would this cushioning keep the containers from being damaged, but it should insulate them as well, making it a lot easier to keep them cold.
Why don't you suggest it?
I'm going.
The biologist's suggestion was adopted. And today, a large part of our overseas shipments of plasma and whole blood is packed in air cap. The biologist received an award of $750, and the sick and wounded in distant or isolated parts of the world now had a better chance of getting these life-saving supplies. Soldiers are usually the ones who benefit most from the suggestions, and they're often the ones who make them.
The dog tags feel cold next to my skin.
I know. And they're noisy, too.
Well, some of the guys tape them.
Not a bad idea. You should keep a copy of this prescription with you all the time, just in case you break a lens or lose your glasses. Too bad I can't just attach it to your dog tags.
Don't worry, sir. I won't lose it.
Good. We should be able to put information like this right on the dog tags. Why not write it on them?
The Major's idea was to put a plastic coat on the dog tags so that vital information could be written on them. But the coating also had other advantages, such as eliminating noise and making them more comfortable to wear next to the skin. However, in spite of its merits, the Major's suggestion wasn't adopted immediately, but eventually it was.
Major, it gives me great pleasure to present you with this award for $1,900.
Thank you, sir.
Not bad.
Not a bit bad. Considering I made the suggestion a long time ago and I'd completely forgotten about it.
Well, obviously somebody didn't forget.
Well, a check like this is always nice to come by.
When suggestions involve radical change or require Army-wide or inter-service applications, they naturally require much more review and approval. And of course, this takes time. But most suggestions can be processed quickly, and if they do have merit, they can be adopted just as fast. Sometimes, however, a suggestion is held up because it demands a lot of time and hard work just to make it possible. For example, Sergeant Farley, as a result of his years of experience with combat communications problems, came up with an idea for a more compact central office telephone group. What's more, it would have twice the capacity of the present equipment and yet be easier to install and operate. The only problem was that the equipment had to be designed and built. Because it was his idea and he had the necessary electronic background, the sergeant was drafted to make the plans and supervise the building of the equipment. It was a tough assignment, and the sergeant did his job well, for his equipment is now being used everywhere by our combat troops. For his suggestion and all the skill and hard work it required, Sergeant Farley received the Army Commendation Medal. And an award of $7,500. This and other cases we've seen are just a few examples of the many kinds of suggestions that have been submitted and adopted under the Army Suggestion Program. Lionel Hernholm was named Economy Champion of the Year by the Secretary of the Army for his suggestion which saved the government $1,775,000. He was awarded the Meritorious Civilian Service Award and a check for $2,880. Everyone has a chance to make suggestions. All it takes is the interest and initiative to translate the familiar gripe, "Why don't they?" into a useful and workable suggestion. There's no question, it pays off for both you and the Army.